Welcome to Real Money, Real Life, the podcast where we get real about money and the messy human stuff that comes with it. I'm Linda Grizely, financial educator and your Me Money guide to financial clarity. Each week, we dive into financial concepts and money strategies, but we always tie it back to real life, emotions, mindset, and how money actually shows up day to day. If you're ready for practical tools, mindset shifts, and honest conversations that meet you where you are, not where the world thinks you should be, you're in the right place. Because you deserve to feel confident with your money and good about how you use it. No judgment, no lectures, and definitely no putting yourself last.
Hello, everyone. If you're listening, you are one of the real ones, the ones who want retirement to feel like a new chapter and not the end of your story. Today, we're going to talk about redefining retirement as graduation rather than an ending. Too often, retirement is framed as stepping away, slowing down, or disappearing from meaningful work. And in this episode, we're going to explore how shifting the narrative from retire to graduate can reshape financial planning, purpose, and personal fulfillment. We'll also discuss what the happiest retirees have in common and how intentional planning can support both financial security and well-being. My guest today is Eric Brotman. He's chairman of the board and chief growth officer of BFG Financial Advisors and managing principal of Brotman Consulting Group. He started in the financial planning industry in 1994 and launched a startup in 2003, which has grown to over 25 employees and over 1 billion in assets under management. He's the author of 3 books, including the award-winning Don't Retire, Graduate, and hosts a podcast by that same name. Welcome, Eric.
Well, thanks, Linda. Don't tire either. Don't retire or tire. That's fine.
Yeah, we don't want to tire. We definitely don't want to tire out. That's part of it, right?
That's part of the problem with the word to begin with. Yeah, you just hit it right on the head. We're done here.
Yeah, right. There we go. There's your lesson for the day. I love that you've reframed retirement as graduation and that it's not a finish line. I would love to hear more about how you came up with that, and I'm sure it's an experience through clients and your own stuff, but go ahead and just give us your story.
Yeah, I started, as you mentioned, I started in this business 32 years ago, which is hard to believe now because it has happened fast. And I was helping, like lots of financial advisors, I was helping people plan for retirement. That was the number one reason people sought out financial advice, was for retirement. And it was this idea that you would run, stop. And what I noticed at first anecdotally, and then more, I dare say scientifically and behaviorally, is that people who retired as a dead stop didn't thrive. They didn't live very long and they weren't happy. The people who were happy were people who had found something better to do, something that they would look forward to, and something to move towards. And I thought about it when I sat down to write my latest book. I thought about the way in which we focus on milestones in our life. The milestones in our life, it could be finishing grade school, it could be finishing driver's ed, it could be finishing college, it could be finishing anything. The end of everything is the beginning of something new. And we could debate without getting religious whether that's true of death or not, but it doesn't have to be true of retirement. To me, retirement is not the absence of work. It's the absence of needing to work. It's being financially independent so that you've earned the choice. You've earned the choice to continue to work or to do consulting or to be part-time or to do volunteer work or to do other things. You now have a life you can design. Don't make it sitting on the couch watching daytime TV and playing shuffleboard and taking the occasional trip, because you won't live very long. You don't thrive.
Yeah, I think that people think that retirement is going to be, lazing around and, getting up late, doing crossword puzzles. But a lot of people they start that and they're like, they just feel like they have no purpose.
100%. And it's funny, I read a book on the subject lately, and one of them said, it turns out that doing crossword puzzles doesn't make you either happier or more intelligent. It just makes you better at crossword puzzles, which I thought was very funny. Which is not a bad thing per se, but it's certainly not enough to live for. It is really important that we stay engaged. I tell people to consider practicing retirement. If you have the ability, if you're either working for yourself, you're self-employed, or you have a sabbatical, or you have some ability to take some time and take a month or 3 or 6 and don't do any work. I defy you to do that and not be bored out of your mind without a real plan. And so I don't know about you, but I love to spend a couple days on the beach doing nothing, reading a book, sitting under an umbrella, but I couldn't do that for 30 years. That's lingering. So I think it's great to have that balance. It's great to have that vision. It's great to say, I want to spend more time with my grandkids, or I want to see the seven wonders of the world, or there's a bucket list, fine. But a bucket list isn't enough. A bucket list is a couple of highlights of what could be half your adult life. It is not the way to spend 30 or 35 years potentially.
Yeah, I love reframing it that way. When you do financial planning then, when you're shifting that and looking at it as a transition rather than an exit, what are you doing differently?
Well, I think when we set a date, it's not the date that you want to be idle. It's the date that you want to have that choice we talked about. So having that financial independence moment, what will it take mathematically? Because that's still quantitative. What will it take mathematically to get you to the point where work is optional? That does not mean work is over. It means work is optional. When you're working for fun, it is a different experience than when you're working to make a mortgage payment or rent or tuition or medical bills or anything else. And I've had a chance to practice this because I stepped down as the CEO of our firm January 1st of this year. And people thought I was retiring. And I said, well, first of all, I'm never retiring because I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And secondly, I have worked a succession plan. Business owners have got to do that. And I didn't want to wait until I was 75 and ran out of choices or ran out of options. I'm in my 50s. I got a lot of gas in this tank. I want to be doing a lot of things, but I also could pass some of the day-to-day responsibilities to someone who is going to do, I think, a better job than I ever could. She's amazing. And so it allowed me to have my cake and eat it too. I am now literally working for fun. I love it. And I'm busier than I expected, actually. I'm busier than I had ever been, and it's because of a feeling of abundance rather than a feeling of scarcity. I get to pick my projects. If anything, I have to learn to say no, and that's a whole different episode. But I'm so many different things are coming across as opportunities, and I'm grabbing them, and I'm having such fun with them. I'm going to have to learn to pick and choose. And what a wonderfully wonderful way to spend, the next chapter of my adult life.
Ah, I love that for you. And I think that you already had this idea in your mind because you wrote the book, and so you kind of knew where you were headed. But what advice would you give people who hadn't really thought about that way yet and are struggling maybe to think what are they going to do next after they retire?
You mean other than reading my book, which of course is the number one piece of advice I could render. I it's really about introspection. It's about figuring ourselves out. What are the things you love to do? I actually, in my consulting practice, started taking financial advisors through a process that I refer to as the Joy Matrix Blueprint. And it's a way to determine what are the things that make us happy professionally? What are the things that bring us joy? What are the things that make us money or more successful as we define it? What are the things that we don't find joyful? And what are the things that don't make us more successful? And you build sort of this matrix, for lack of a more elegant term, and you figure out what should I be spending more of my time on? What should I reserve time for? What should I delegate, eliminate, automate? How do I get rid of the stuff that makes work feel like work, instead of making it feel like an adventure? And I've been able to really implement that. I will tell you, Linda, that when I wrote the book, it was coming from a position of having seen hundreds of families do this, but I had no idea what it actually felt like. It wasn't until it was my turn. The book came out just in time for COVID, so of course there was no book tour. But at the end of the day, it was all intellectual. It was an academic pursuit almost. And now that I've lived some of it myself, I had a financial retirement date on my financial plan that said 2028. I've had it there for years. 2028, I want to be done. I want to never have to work again. And two things have happened. Number one, I pushed that date up to 2025, some of it through investing in financial decisions, some of it just through some grit. But I also, on that same plan, have said now I sort of want my quote unquote retirement date, my slowdown date to be 2041. So it's not that I want to do less. It's that I want to do the things that fill my tank, that bring me joy, and I'm in that position to do it. So for people who haven't thought about this, if you're in a job you hate, the idea of working longer than you have to is miserable. You can't wait to be done. I consider that a very sad existence. And for some, there isn't a ton of choice. For whatever reason, you're sort of stuck. If you can get unstuck, and millennials, I give millennials a hard time because they're easy to pick on, and I love picking on them. So we should do that now. But I also think that they've come up with something great, which was the side hustle. This idea that you can also chase a passion, even if it's not the one that puts food on your table per se, and it allows you to transition gradually over time. So I give millennials and Gen Zs a lot of credit for doing that. If you haven't thought about it, think about the things that bring you joy. Think about the things that put food on the table and see if you can combine them. Because if you combine them, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, I agree. I almost think though Gen Zs and millennials they're doing it out of need too. It's not like they're just like, "Oh, I wanna do this also." They're like, "I need to do something else also."
I
Um,
agree with you. I'm not saying that they did
yeah,
it for fun, but it is a good solution and it helps
it
protect
is.
them from certain unemployment and certain other things. Like their financial plan is better suited than the Gen Xers and the boomers because
Yeah,
we really had our eggs in one basket professionally, whereas they have more of an option. I agree with you though. A lot of times it's because they can't support themselves on one salary. Again, that's a different discussion for a different
yeah,
time, but I think they've made lemonade out of that, what could have been a lemon.
definitely. Okay, so you did mention your book. Tell us more about the book. Go ahead and dive into that a little bit here because I think that is really a big part of this conversation.
Well, the book was written to be a path to financial independence. It's a way to build your own financial plan, whether you wind up hiring a financial advisor or not. And there are lots of people who either don't hire a financial advisor because they don't know one or don't trust one or don't feel like they have enough money for one. And there's lots of baggage around money, as you well know. But the book was written to be very accessible. It's an easy read. It's in first person. A lot of it is telling stories. A lot of it is written to be the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years of your financial life. So each chapter is a course as if it was a college curriculum, but it's definitely not written to be a textbook in any way. So your freshman year, you're making certain decisions. You're dealing with maybe student loans. You're dealing with your first job and your employee benefits and starting good habits and how to pay yourself first and maybe how to get out of debt. By your sophomore year, you're thinking about major life events. Am I going to get married or live with someone or not? Am I going to buy my first home? And do I want to have children? And how does that impact your financial life? By junior year, we're talking a lot more about investing and growing wealth, but also about taxes because you tend to be in a higher income spot. So there's some additional tax issues there. And senior year, it's not just about long term care and estate planning. It's not the end of the world. It's also what do I want to be when I grow up? And how do I make sure that I'm still adding value and I'm still moving towards something? And, I remember the day I graduated from college vividly. In fact, I finished in 3.5 years. I couldn't wait to get out of school. And not because I didn't like it, but because I was excited to get a job. I was excited to work. I don't know if the 54-year-old me would tell the 21-year-old me to do that again, but nonetheless, I did it. And I remember the day that I dropped off my thesis and was done. And I remember walking out of Bennett Hall at 34th and Walnut Streets in Philadelphia and going, "Oh my God, what now?" And I had a job lined up for February. So I only had a gap of 6 weeks, but I still had this overwhelming feeling of, oh my God, I did it. And sort of now what? And then my car got towed that day. So I'll never forget the way that when I dropped my thesis off, I had to go get my car at an impound lot. That was a special moment for me and for the Philadelphia Transit team. But nonetheless, it is a special moment. It is something you don't forget. And, when I eventually crossed that stage, which was May, I had already been working for a few months. It was a little anticlimactic for me because I had already launched. There were a lot of classmates and friends who either didn't have a job lined up yet or who had one but hadn't started it yet. I actually got to walk across the stage at graduation having already begun my day job. And I think there was something incredibly valuable to that because it felt less like an ending and more like a continuum. And I didn't do that on purpose. That was dumb luck at 21. But I think it was a good thing.
Yeah. I don't it was almost like you were just, like you said, continuous flow, like you already know where you're going. And I think that probably took a lot of the fear out of that graduation, because I'm sure there were a lot of people walking about that stage saying like, "Oh my god, what next?" but really not have anything what next. And
It's true.
that's scary.
Well, it's true, although I wouldn't say the fear was gone because my first salary was not enough to pay rent. I had to get a roommate. Rent was $610 a month, and I couldn't pay the whole thing. I had to split it with somebody. I was not making a living. I was eking by, and I thought I was fancy coming out of school. Like, boy, everyone's going to want to hire me and throw lots of money at me. And oops, that's not what really happens. And it still doesn't happen that way. And I learned a very valuable lesson, which was I went from being the top of the heap to being the low man on the totem pole instantly, as we do as we grow. And it made me realize that my education wasn't over. So my education became a continuum, and I think that's really important when we talk about folks in general. I think if you think that you can get out of college and know everything you need to know by 21 or 22, your life is going to be long, your career is going to be long. There are jobs that exist today that didn't exist when I was in college that we couldn't have been prepared for. So I think education needs to be a lifetime spectrum too. So if you're growing, if you're evolving, if you're learning, if you're creating new skills, if you're generating new habits, interests, hobbies, then you're always growing. And you never feel like you're stuck punching this clock, like I can't wait to be done. If you on Friday afternoon want to bolt out of the office and on Sunday morning, Sunday night, you start to feel sick to the stomach, like, oh, I got to go to work tomorrow, let's find something else for you to do. That is a terrible way to experience life, candidly.
Yeah. I don't know if you know my story at all, Eric, but I twice have walked away from jobs that I loved the job itself, but the situation I was in was not good, and I had that. I would have a pit in my stomach, like I got to go to work, and I both times I walked away. I just and took some very bold steps because I knew that I wasn't going to live my life like that.
Well, it's part of the reason why you're evolving and why you're as happy as you are. It's seriously, it's why you're happy. You could still be punching that first clock
Yeah.
and maybe making more money. It's not about the money at a given point. Once you're making a living, it's no longer about the money. Now it's about having a sense of purpose and a sense of pride and doing something that you feel matters, whatever that is. And it could be a lot of different kinds of jobs. We don't all have to be doctors to feel like we're making a difference in the world. There's lots of ways to do that. But I give you a lot of credit for walking away. And I do remember that conversation. We met, we were in Oregon, right? When we met,
Yeah.
and we sat and had a conversation about it. And I remember sort of dumbfounded that you would just quit before you found out what you wanted to do next, which I have advised plenty of people not to do, by the way. Like, don't quit your day job till you have a new day job. But you like to buck some trends, Linda. What can I tell you?
Yeah, well, I don't give people the same advice that I'm not a I'm not a good, like, do as I say, not as I do person.
Hmm. Well, all right. So the truth is out.
Yeah,
Advise, better for you, but not for me. I got you.
yeah. But no, it was, it needed to be done, and I don't have any regrets, so, but yeah. Okay, so let's talk more about don't retire, graduate, or if you are you done talking about the book, or did you wanna say more about the book?
Well, I mean, heck, we can talk about the book for hours. I
Okay.
would say that the book itself, I mentioned that each chapter was a course. I don't believe in homework. Nobody likes homework. So at the end of each course is a fun quiz to see how much you've got. No grades, and then an extra credit assignment. Because growing up, I never wanted to do homework, but I always did extra credit. It felt like a gimme. And the extra credit assignments we have put into a workbook. So for anyone who would like, you now have a workbook with 20 exercises that will build your financial plan. And by the time you go through it, you will have a financial plan that you can either discuss with your planner or ideally, definitely discuss with your spouse or significant other. And it's something to work toward. And it begins with, I know I'm going to use the B word, but it begins with some budgeting. And I don't love the B word, but you start with cash flow and then you figure out risk management and then you figure out investments and growth and taxes and and philanthropy and paying for kids education and all the things that we're faced with. But it really is designed to be a blueprint to do it yourself. And for folks who take it seriously, I think you're going to really enjoy the workbook as well.
I like that. Yeah, and I don't like calling it a budget either. It's cash flow. It's like what's coming in, what's going out. Budget is
Yep.
restrictive. And sometimes you need that, but mostly we just talk about cash flow and understanding it. I would
Yeah,
like
it's
to
the
know
difference
when you
between nutrition. It's the difference between nutrition and a diet. None of us want to
Oh,
talk about
yeah,
a diet, but we all want nutrition. That's the
right.
difference. Yeah.
That's true. Good way that's a good analogy. Alright, so when you talk to people about how to figure out what's next, if
Mhm.
somebody's, just had their mindset on retirement and but they don't really have a plan, but they haven't really thought about it, what types of things are they looking at? Are you talking about volunteering? Are you talking about consulting? Are you talking about, working at the golf course as a starter? Like, what kinds of things are you talking to people about?
Well, it starts with them, not with me. I mean, it really has to be what are the things that you enjoy. I tell people that planning for retirement psychologically and emotionally takes 2 years. So it's not financially, it might take more years to solve to solve that equation. But if you give your 2 weeks notice and then decide, all right, now I'm going to figure it out, you're starting at a disadvantage. I think it's really important, whatever we're going to be doing, that we're building that network and those relationships along the way. So if you want to work at a golf course, don't wait until you're done to start going to golf courses, knocking on doors and saying, hey, would you hire me? Start planning for that in advance. Start meeting the right people. Start going to the right networking events. Um, find out who, of the 5 clubs in your area, who actually hires retirees as starters. I mean, all those kinds of things. Know where you're going to go before it's time to do that. I think the same thing's true if you want to volunteer. If you want to volunteer at the food bank, while they'll be perfectly happy to have you show up one day and say, "Hey, I'm here to help," you might find that getting involved sooner while you're still working gives you a leg up and some inside information in terms of where you can be most useful to the organization. So you get on their board or you're on a committee or you're already volunteering, you already know the right people and you can say, I really want to get plugged in at a higher level, and you can call the people you already know and say, what's the best way to do this, instead of just having it out of off of Google. I think it makes sense to build those relationships. Don't ever let your LinkedIn profile just say Linda Grizely, retire, ever, because it might as well say date of death, whatever the date was, because you are no longer relevant.
Yeah.
Don't be retired. We can be all different things. I'm not just a financial advisor. What am I? I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a hockey fan. I'm a avid reader. I enjoy all kinds of things. Like, I'm not just this. If this is my whole identity, then I have to be psychologically ready to have no identity. And that's hard. And it's not smart. We do that a lot in this country. And it is a very American thing, although I find it's true in Australia and in the UK too. For whatever reason, we tend to identify who we are with what we do. And when somebody says, "Oh, Linda, tell me about yourself," we are inclined to start with what we do during the day. That is not who we are. That is what we do. And until we can figure out who we really are and take an integrative approach to our whole life, not just have it be, well, I punch this clock and I do this job. There's so much more to us, because if that's all we have, the day we don't have it, we're lost. And that's scary and sad.
Yeah, that is. So, let's talk a little bit about people's identity getting wrapped up in their career and income.
Hmm.
Because, for instance, my husband's in the fire service and he's been in for 34 years and he's going to be retiring soon. And we're still trying to figure out what's next for him. He's got some ideas,
Hmm.
but I mean, he's really, I mean, that's been his identity. That's been what he's done for 34 years. And I'm actually really concerned because he lives and breathes it. So he's like, I mean, even when he's not at the firehouse or on shift, he's in the bureau now, but even when he's not there, he's still everything is about the fire department.
Well, if you have a volunteer fire company in your area, it would be a wonderful thing for him to get involved and start doing some of that. First of all, they could use the help. And second of all, it'll allow him to plug in and still be part of a fraternity that, even if it's 1 or 2 days a week, I think he'll still feel that sense of purpose and that pull, and he'll make a huge difference in the community and use his skill set to save lives and make a huge difference. So it may not be an all or nothing. It might be that he starts working at the volunteer fire company and he's still involved on some level. There's also, ways to get involved in the community if that's what he wants to do. If he truly doesn't need the money, he's taking the pension, he's going to have Social Security at some point, and he's feeling good about it. Um, then he can certainly find other things to do. But to me, that would be the first step. If he loves it and it's part of who he is, why give it up? Just because you don't need a check anymore, maybe give up the long weeks, but don't give up making a difference at what you're great at. The world needs you.
Yeah. I've changing the subject a little. I've
Mhm,
seen people who have worked in careers for a really long time then think that they're going to do consulting in
mhm,
retirement, but then they end up being a business owner.
mhm,
And being the business owner does not make them happy. They just want to do the work.
mhm.
Um, all the things that go in with running the business and all that clutters things up. So what advice would you give them?
Well, it's good to know that before you launch. At the end of the day, I've been a business owner for 30 years, and so when I started a consulting practice, I structured it as a business, and like having a second business, which that's the way I like to do things. Not because I want to do all the day-to-day management, but because I wanted to have some structure. If you really want to do consulting, but you don't want to own a business, then you need to find a group, a consultancy where you can be one of their people and not have to necessarily do it by yourself. Now, there's pros and cons to that. The pros are you don't have to worry about some of the behind the scenes blocking and tackling, but the negatives are you may or may not get to choose all your assignments. You don't want to be an employee. You want to choose the assignments or the projects that make you happy. So you need to make sure that you still have autonomy in that regard. You might be sharing revenue. So you might have to share some portion of what you're billing. You might have a responsibility to bill a certain amount, which may not be aligned with either your value proposition or how you feel. If you're doing consulting and you happen to be doing a gig for a nonprofit, you might want to charge less just because you can. Make sure that you're in that position, but to be a consultant doesn't mean you have to be a business owner if you can find a group of consultants that are looking for others to help. And again, that takes 2 years. It doesn't just, you don't wake up one day and go, I think I'm going to find this. Start working on that right away. Get into the culture. Make sure you're going to like the people and the systems and the process. And it doesn't mean you're not working from home. It doesn't mean you have to suddenly punch somebody else's clock, but you have to understand the framework so that you can participate in it and be a valuable member of that community so that they want you there and you want to be there.
Yeah, I like that. All right, what kind of things do people most commonly fear as they're approaching retirement age?
Well, they don't fear loss of identity until they actually do it, and then they fear that dramatically, and that is huge. I would say the biggest thing is when you go from having a predictable paycheck or at least regular paychecks of some kind to not getting one, that's a little scary. We spend 30, 40, 50 years building our nest egg, building our 401k, our savings, our investments, all of those things, and now we're supposed to use them for the first time. Heck, I don't even like using my own travel reward points because I feel like I've got this nice balance and I hate giving them up. You know how silly that is? And that's how people feel about their retirement. They don't want to touch their IRAs because they don't want to pay taxes. Well, at some point, somebody's going to. They're afraid to run out of money. That is the biggest fear because people are living longer than any of us maybe anticipated. And running out of money is terrifying. I've heard it said that to be young and broke is an inconvenience, and to be old and broke is a tragedy. And a lot of financial advisors, a lot of the software, which I mostly can't stand, does what's called a Monte Carlo simulation, which basically says you have an X% chance of being just fine. I don't want an 88% chance of being fine. I want as close to 100% as I can get. And I don't want to be fine. I want to be great, you know? And any plan that says you're going to be okay till you're 89, but you're under a bridge at 90, not a good plan. Just not a good plan. Like we have to be in a position where you cannot outlive your money. And the decisions that you have to make, and some of these are in the book, and some of these are just part of the financial planning that we do. When the pendulum swings from accumulating to preserving or decumulating, it is a one-time shift. It is a massive one, maybe the biggest life shift we've had since we left full-time academia and went to full-time work. So for a lot of people, it's the first really big, and you could argue, yes, getting married is a big shift, and of course it is, but I think the biggest shifts we make in life are from academic to work, where you're suddenly independent and responsible for yourself, and from work to no work, or work to less work, or whatever that looks like. It is it is daunting, and people are terrified to spend the money they've saved their whole lives, and they're terrified that they're going to run out of money. And I've seen some of the saddest situations where people who have built really huge nest eggs are so afraid to use it that they never take the trip. They never do the things, the rainy day stuff they said we're going to save for. They never did it, and you die with a bunch of money. And
Yeah.
he who dies with the most toys still dies, and maybe didn't play with them all. Live life, do things. So there's got to be a balance between living and enjoying our lives now and doing the right thing for the long term. If you only do one or the other, it's going to be very sad at some point. Either you're spending every penny you make or spending $1.10 for every dollar you make. And we're not the federal government. We can't keep doing that. So you're spending more than you make or every dollar you make, which is fine as long as you're making money. But the day you're not making money, you have a problem. Or you're saving every penny almost miserly like you're not even getting that cup of coffee in the morning because you're afraid to spend any money, and you're saving it for later, and you get there, and then you're not healthy enough to take the trip you can now afford. You can't walk that walk or do that trip or have the excursion. You have to live. So finding that balance is big. And with financial independence, there are three primary strategies that people can deploy to utilize their assets, and it's entirely based on the withdrawal rate. How much of your nest egg every year do you need in order to maintain your life, either with dignity or with a comparable lifestyle to what you were used to? Whatever your plan looks like. Some people say you only need 50 or 60 or 70% of your pre-retirement income. I consider that a recipe for failure. I think you should try to get to 100% of your pre-retirement income, so you're not taking a pay cut just because you're taking a work cut. That's ideal. Now, not everybody lives in an ideal world. I absolutely acknowledge that. But if you're in a position to create that for yourself, what a great goal to not take a pay cut just because you take a paycheck stop. And then the three strategies which will rely on that withdrawal rate are either a total return strategy where you have so much money it doesn't matter and it's all in one big pot and you can just pull against it. Or you have asset segregation where you need separate pots, the bucket strategy, several different pots of money, some of which are for short term and some of which are for long term and so forth. Or there's annuitization where you truly don't have enough money to live with dignity and you need to rely on insurance companies or others to help provide that kind of assurance. And no one is necessarily in a vacuum. You can combine those strategies a lot of different ways. But it's all going to depend on how big is your nest egg and how much do you need. Every $1 million that we're able to save or create, assuming a 4% withdrawal, and that is not to suggest 4% is a safe rate or not rate. I'm just using it as a barometer. But a 4% withdrawal against $1 million is $40,000 a year. So this whole idea that, I'm a millionaire, I've got $1 million. Well, that's $40,000 a year. I suspect in most cases that's less than you make, and you're not going to want to live on that. So the number that we need is dramatically larger than people realize. And especially for young people, if you're 25 right now, by the time you figure inflation into this, the number you need is massive. It's not impossible. You can get there, especially if you start early, but the number itself is big. Remember that my grandparents paid for their house what I pay for a car now. That's inflation. So the dollar figure, the number itself isn't what matters. It's the lifestyle. It's what it means. What they paid for a house might sound like nothing to us today for a house, but their income was $11,000 a year. So the math. You have to understand inflation and the value of the dollar, and that helps you make decisions. And so some of this is math and it's academic, but most of these things are based on behavior. They're based on psychology. They're based on prioritization. A lot of them are based on health. Are you able to enjoy your retirement or not? Have you taken care of yourself? And that matters too.
Absolutely. Okay. Small things that people can do this week to start preparing for retirement differently. Obviously, start saving if you haven't already. Invest early, invest often. What else can they do?
Well, step one is always the same. It's inventory. Figure out where you are and be real honest with yourself and be real honest with your spouse or partner. Where are we? You used to navigate a giant mall. I know malls barely exist today, but there was always a kiosk and there was a little sticker that said, "You are here." If you're not honest with yourself about exactly where you are and you're not transparent with your spouse or partner to be able to discuss that, then this exercise is almost fruitless. In order to know where you want to be or how you're going to get there, you have to know where you are and you have to be honest with yourself. Do you have a spending issue? Do you have some debt issues that need to be resolved? If you do, then chipping away at that becomes one of the most paramount things you can do. And then getting out of debt and staying out of debt is a very big deal. If you're not in debt, God love you. And not all debt is bad debt. Having a mortgage is not necessarily bad debt. Having consumer debt, having a credit card balance is by definition a bad debt. But if you are in a position where you don't have debt, get into some good habits of paying yourself first. Make the first bills you pay every month the ones to yourself, whether it's to savings or investment or excess debt payments or something positive for the long term, and don't touch it. And keep that percentage either level or growing over your entire life. So if you decide when you're 22 years old, let's say you do have three roommates and you can afford to put a little money away, if you decide I'm gonna save 5% or 10% or whatever of my income just to get in the habit of doing it. And every year that number goes from 10 to 11 or 12 or 13%, or even it gets to 20% and you leave it there. Every time you get a raise, you're now by definition putting away more money. You're keeping up with inflation, the cost of living, and your lifestyle. If you can live on 80% of what you make forever without debt, you're very likely to have success in retirement financially. So I think the things to do, you start with inventory, an honest appraisal of where you are with yourself and with your partner, and then begin taking steps to either close a gap if you have one, or to start building accumulation if you're in that position. And all of that is paramount to having financial success. It is all about behavior. It's never too late to start, but it's always better if you start yesterday than tomorrow. And if you're 55 and you're saying, "Oh my gosh, I haven't started," don't throw up your hands and say it's too late. I'm going to live under a bridge or in a box. Get started, because it might just be that 10 or 15 years will allow you to have some dignity in your later years. And that's worth doing. It's worth pursuing.
Good advice. All right. Eric, tell us who needs to find you.
Well, it's fun that we're able to represent at our firm so many different folks from so many different walks of life. We don't have an asset minimum, so we're a little bit unique in that regard. In that we can work with families who are just getting started or up and coming, and as a result, we cast a very wide net in terms of the folks who work with us. And of course, we also have solutions for very high net worth families and multi generational philanthropists. But um, to be able to work with a wide swath of people is a good thing. I would say for people who have positive cash flow and are in a position to be saving money, they ought to be talking to someone about financial advice, whether it's us or someone else. If you have negative cash flow and you have a debt issue, I would say invest $20 on a book and start taking advice on how to get out of that debt. There's a lot of examples. The freshman year of your life, a lot of times financially, is let's get out of this hole. So, not everyone should pay a financial advisor and not everyone can pay a financial advisor, but at least begin that process. So if you have positive cash flow, if you're making more than you spend, you should have some advice on what to do with that, and have some monitoring, in my opinion. If you have negative cash flow or serious debt, then spend $20. Don't engage an advisor. It's premature, but start to work through some of that yourself. We have a ton of tools on our website. And actually, we have a website called bfguniversity.com with a ton of free resources, podcasts, webinars, some ebooks and other things. They're free to anyone who'd like them. So if you're even thinking $20 for a book is a bad idea, there's some free resources out there about taxes or about financial wellness or about employee benefits or about the things that you need. We've tried to reach everybody and try and make a difference to everyone we can at every end of that spectrum. And then, for the staunch do-it-yourselfers out there who can't imagine hiring a financial advisor, maybe get a second opinion anyway. Let's see how you're doing. What are you really doing well? Because very few people do really well at everything. Some people say, I can really manage my investments, but I'm not doing great with other things: estate planning, tax planning, insurance planning, other things. Most of us have blind spots. And if I didn't do this all day long, I would absolutely hire someone. In fact, my wife and I work with one of the advisors in our office here and sit down so I can take off my planner hat and put on my husband hat and my father hat and really have an accountability partner, because I believe that strongly in having dispassionate, objective advice.
Yeah, even advisors need advisors. It's hard to do your own plan because you need to get out of your own head.
Well, and you like to write. I like to write. You can't edit your own work because your brain is seeing what it thinks you wrote or what you meant to say. It's not reading it dispassionately and saying that doesn't come across right, or that doesn't make sense, or that's not spelled properly, or any of the things. We can't edit our own work. Dentists don't do their own root canals. They hire another dentist to handle that. Financial advisors should have financial advisors. The fact that we know what we're talking about might make the meetings shorter. It might mean we can use all the jargon, but it doesn't mean that we can necessarily make great decisions for ourselves all the time, because we have our own blind spots and our own biases. We all do. It's human.
Yeah. All right, tell us where people can find your book.
Well, I mentioned bfguniversity.com, which is a great spot to get free information. You can also go to don'tretiregraduatebook.com, or you can just go to Amazon. And if you go to Amazon and you look up Don't Retire Graduate, or you look up my name, you will find the books that I've written. I think the most recent one, Don't Retire Graduate, is the only one you need. That's the one to buy. I will say, Linda, just for having some fun with your audience, there are 2 Eric D. Brotmans with author pages on Amazon. It's a true story. One of them was there before I was. So when I created my author page, I had to compete with this gentleman who is a PhD who writes books on how to toilet train cats. It's entirely true. I can't make it up. And when I tell you that fraternity brothers have sent me multiple copies of that over the years because they think it's hysterical, true story. So I think we're probably his biggest customer for books. It's a picture book of cats on toilets. No joke.
Oh my goodness, that's
For the
funny.
record, I did not write
Only you,
that.
Eric. Only you.
I did not write that one. Nope,
Oh.
that wasn't me.
All right, everyone. Okay. So get the things from bfguniversity.com. Lots of free resources there. I also have some free resources on my website, lindagriz.com/resources. And I'm building a community, space for real talk and fresh starts and people who are done putting themselves last with their finances. So check the show notes for all that. And everyone, here is your closing nugget. Retirement isn't about stepping away from value. It's about stepping into it differently. You're not done. You're graduating. Thanks so much for being my guest today, Eric.
Linda, it was great. Always nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Real Money, Real Life. Want to see what's blocking you from financial confidence or discover your money personality? Head to the resources page at lindagriz.com for our free quizzes. That's LINDAGRIZ.com/resources. If you're loving what you're learning, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. I'm your Me Money Guide to Financial Clarity, Linda Grizely, and I'll catch you next time as we talk more real money, real life, because you deserve to feel confident with your money and good about how you spend it. The content shared here is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not financial, tax, legal, or planning advice and does not constitute therapy or mental health counseling. Please consult an actively licensed and qualified professional for advice or help specific to your situation.